Hello, CFCers. I so enjoy Tuesday and everything you guys say in our Bible studies together. And we're memorizing 1 Corinthians 13, not only in the Tuesday morning group, but it's going to be the theme of our study at Reader Ranch. And I wanted to give you a little bit of help in terms of memorizing this great chapter. From the NIV, we come to verse 1 where it says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal." Now, we read that or we try to memorize it, and those words, resounding gong and clanging cymbal, just go just right over us. So let me see if I can't help you understand the importance of these words. Paul was writing to the Christians who lived in the city of Corinth. And in this magnificent port city, where people from all over the world would come to do commerce, there were three temples of Aphrodite, the Roman goddess of love. Now, the largest temple was on top of the city, called the Corinth, and men would come to this temple to worship Aphrodite by joining themselves to prostitutes. In fact, the great Greek historian Strabo said that there were at least 1,000 courtesans, is what he called them, slaves of Aphrodite, who would sell themselves to the men who had come to Corinth, who would pay their money in homage to Aphrodite, but join themselves to prostitutes in worship of the goddess of love. Now, how were these people called to go to the temple for these sexual rituals? Well, it was through a gong. It was through a suspended metal gong, according to Strabo, that would be hit by a courtesan. And then when the sound reverberated throughout the city, remember there were three temples, then people would begin making their way to the temple of Aphrodite. Strabo said it would be well for some men never to make the trip to Corinthos because men lost a lot of money. They often found themselves with venereal disease. It was a place of genuine lust. Now, I know some modern historians quibble with Strabo and say you have no evidence that there was temple prostitution in Corinth. But, I believe Strabo. He lived during the days of Paul and during the days of Christ. And I believe the Apostle Paul, because if you go on in reading 1 Corinthians, you'll see in chapter 6, he talks about how awful it is for a man to join his body to a prostitute. And now we come to 1 Corinthians 13, and he talks about the gong, the call to worship to the temple of Aphrodite. And then what are these clanging cymbals? Well, some of your translations may use the term tinkling cymbals. It's a Greek word that means this soft cymbal sound that is made. Let me tell you what happened. The courtesans, the prostitutes, would have around their ankles little brass bells that would hit each other and make these tinkling cymbal sounds as they walked to the temple of Aphrodite. So, with this in mind, I want you to think about what you're memorizing. It's the chapter on what love really is. God's kind of love for you and the kind of love you're to have for others. And here's what he says. Look, you can be the most eloquent person in the world. You can speak with all the tongues of messengers from heaven, with the 6,000 known tongues of mankind. You could be a polylinguist. Oh, love, God's kind of love. You're nothing but a resounding gong and tinkling cymbals. In other words, you've joined yourself prostitution, to fake love. Whoa. Someone has said, I think rightfully so, and I'll finish with this. Anyone who knocks on the door of a brothel is searching for God. You know, have you ever noticed that any kinds of addiction to pornography precludes relational love? Have you ever asked yourself why? Well, God's kind of love is not selfish. It is not impatient. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Believes all things, hopes all things, trusts all things. 16 characteristics of God's kind of love. But if you don't have that, you may say you have love, but it's fakery. It's Aphrodite love. It may be sensual or erotic. It may involve some kind of attraction to beauty, but it doesn't advance the kingdom. Here's the good news. Memorize this chapter, because when you take it in and it becomes part of you and you understand what real love is, then when your spouse and you are having struggles, all you can think about is what God says about real love. And you meditate on it. You chew the cud. You let your mind be saturated with His word, and you will find yourself transformed, because you will start loving your spouse the way God loves you. And you'll not be like those men who traveled to Corinth to visit the Temple of Aphrodite. That's the resounding gong and the tinkling cymbals. And the good news is this. When you finish your memorization, you will find that the Apostle Paul says, love never fails. When you practice God's kind of love, as we're memorizing in 1 Corinthians 13, it will never fail you, ever. It never fails. How would you like to have an insurance policy that never fails you? How would you like to have an appliance that never fails you? How would you like to have a car that never fails? Listen, you've got the love of God that will never fail. This is how the chapter begins, and I pray as you memorize it, you'll see the difference between fake love and God's love. I'll see you next Tuesday.